Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. Wanted to record this video to go over this really cool new poll that came out by the University of New Hampshire Survey Center regarding the potential 2022 Senate election and various matchups against the incumbent Maggie Hassan. It's been a pretty interesting point of contention because it is viewed as one of the potentially competitive races given the proper conditions in 2022. That said, New Hampshire has had a decently left leaning, Democratic leaning tilt in the past couple of years. But again, with a governor like Chris Sununu, they could make the election rather competitive. And that's what we're seeing in this poll here today. A lot of interesting bits of information here. I mean, for starters, the top line is this number right here, a 48% to 46% margin, well within the margin of error, but showing Sununu slightly ahead. Obviously, Democrats and Republicans pretty much entirely behind the member of their party. However, we look at the split and we can clearly see that, Chris Sununu has overwhelming support among independents, which again, could change. I mean, we're still over a year and a half out from the election, and Sununu hasn't even decided to run yet. But it's interesting to look, and as we kind of look into the crosstabs a little bit more, you kind of see what you expect: the young, strongly supporting Hassan, with those, kind of more middle-aged Americans between 35 and 64, overwhelmingly supporting Chris Sununu, and then 65 and older splitting it right down the middle. And then you can look through the rest of the poll, but pretty self-explanatory. Then you look, former Senator Kelly Ayotte, who lost by about 1,000 votes to Hassan in 2016, is also relatively competitive. You see she's trailing Hassan by about 5 points, 48% to 43%. But again, we're talking over a year and a half out, still competitive. That said, the information here shown by this poll, I think more or less expected, because this is what we saw in some of the initial polls between Jeanne Shaheen and Don Bolduc back in 2020. But you can see pretty clearly here, he's trailing Hassan by about 13 points. I do think that he would shore up a lot of the support here from Republicans, probably get that up to around 90%, narrow in those margins as, voters, quote unquote, come back home, come back to their base. But, he goes from, someone like Sununu or Jeanne Shaheen having solid margins among independent voters to, fighting it to a draw with Hassan, which, in a state that is increasingly leaning towards the Democrats, it's not a terribly good look for him. And then lastly, I think that the next thing, and this is my, personally something that I find to be very interesting, and, it shows that New Hampshire is not a conducive environment for Trumpism in, for that matter, in 2020 or 2021, and probably most likely in 2022, is Corey Lewandowski, the Trump acolyte and former campaign manager back in 2016. He performs by far the worst, a negative 19-point margin relative to Hassan. And, again, I would expect some of those numbers among Republicans to go over to Mr. Lewandowski in a head-on-head matchup with Hassan. But I do think he would obviously get crushed by Democrat, and the Democrats solidly behind Hassan, and he would get crushed by independents. And that is because, Corey Lewandowski is someone who is strongly aligned with former President Trump, and President Trump was not competitive in 2020 in New Hampshire, and any of his acolytes are most likely to not be competitive. You can see it in the crosstabs. Basically, every major group, tends to go over to Hassan. I mean, granted, he does have a decent margin among those, and more middle-aged, but these are very small margins relative to the 62% margin that Hassan gets among the young and the 25% margin she gets among seniors. And then same thing when you break it down by education, he loses every single demographic, with the only real demographic that he is winning are those who voted for President Trump, which is to be expected of any Republican candidate. So, I will kind of end this, keep this video short. I just wanted to highlight that, again, looking a little bit more into detail on like the favorability, Hassan has a net positive 4-point margin, decently popular. Sununu is massively popular with a 36% positive margin, 55 to 19%. And then everyone else, with the exception of Lewandowski, draws at about a split. AI being out of the public sphere now for about 4.5 years, or relatively out of the public sphere. She's become more or less unknown, at least relative to what she used to be. But 29%, 30%, favorable, unfavorable for a negative 1% margin is something that could easily be overcome in a general election. Bolduc remains pretty unknown despite running for the Republican nomination in 2020. But, you see here he has a negative 5-point margin underwater with his favorability numbers, but something that he could work on. The one person who can't really rebound from it, in my opinion, is Corey Lewandowski. He has a negative 20-point margin with regards to favorability, with only 16% viewing him favorable to 36% against. And again, you can go in a little bit deeper here to these crosstabs to get a little bit of a better sense about how you think the election may play out using this particular poll. It's still super early to speculate, but, again, you can look at some of these numbers and say, well, it's Sununu's a little bit ahead, but, we can see that there are a little bit more Democrats undecided that will probably end up going over to Hassan relative to Republicans who have largely made up their minds. But, again, it's really early, tough to see. So we'll just have to see how this all plays out in the next coming year and a half or so. And I'm looking forward to, covering every poll as it comes out with regards to the New Hampshire race. Kind of going here to our election map, I think that this is my initial Senate prediction. After this poll, I would just probably mark New Hampshire now as a toss-up, now that we have some kind of concrete data. This would be probably the decision made once Sununu makes a decision to run. But for right now, we'll just keep it as a tilt Democratic state until we get a little bit more better idea on who is going to be running in 2022. So with that, I'll leave it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope it was a little bit informative. And as always, feel free to leave any suggestions or comments on future videos I should make. Have a good one and stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks again.